Hi everybody, this is the week 2, webcast 2. This is going to be a short one. We're just going to investigate zooming within InDesign. It's hard to believe that we could have an entire webcast of just zooming, but because it's something that we're doing constantly in InDesign, there are several different ways for us to handle it, and I want to be sure that we go through that completely. So I'm just going to go back to my application sharing. Let's get up a spread here. All right, we have, as I said, several ways for us to zoom in and out. Probably one of the most obvious ways is at the top of your application window, in the application bar, is a zoom level drop-down menu. I can hold that triangle down and I can zoom to several presets between 5% and 4,000%. And just because 73.2% is not listed on this menu doesn't mean that you can't go to that exact zoom setting. It just has to be between 5 and 4,000%. So I can choose one of these and zoom in to some ridiculous number, or I can highlight the number in that field and just type in something like 183.2%. And that's the zoom setting that InDesign will respond to. Though this is fine if you've got your hand on the mouse and you don't be moving around quite that much, most people opt for some of the better tools for zooming in and out. One option is the view menu. So you have a zoom in, which by the way takes you from whatever zoom setting you're in to the next predefined zoom setting. So right now we're at 200%, and if I go to the view menu and say zoom in, I will get 300% because on this drop-down menu, that's the jump that it makes. Notice too though that we have keyboard equivalents, and to be honest, anybody who's been working in InDesign for any time at all is not going to be using these menu items. They're going to be using the keyboard equivalents. So we've got zoom in, zoom out, fit page and window. Let's pay attention to that keyboard equivalent Control-0. That is probably one of the most popular zoom setting keyboard equivalents. You're going to use this constantly. Fit spread and window, add the Alt or the Option key to either the Control-0 or on the Mac, it will be Command-0. Actual size, as close as you can get from pixels to actual size, is Control-1. And then we have an entire pasteboard, Alt-Shift-Control-0. But by the time you hold that many keys down, you may decide you want to handle that a different way. Let's just do that a couple of times. If I press Control-0, I get my page to fit in the window. And this is what we do most of the day. I am zooming in to some small detail to see if I've got it right. Maybe it's editing a couple of letters. Maybe it's looking at how the pixels are looking at that zoom setting. Maybe it's checking the alignment of something that is so close that I've got to be zoomed in this far to see it clearly. But I don't want to go zoom out, zoom out, zoom out, zoom out. I want to get back and see my full page and say, okay, now what does this page look like? So I press Control-0. And when I've got a class of students in front of me, I usually say, all right, I want you to zoom in on something and then zoom all the way back out, Control-0, zoom back in on something, all the way back out, and do that at least 3 times. But I need to give you the shortcuts for zooming in. So let's move to that next. We have a zoom tool over here to the right of the hand tool. And by the way, the hand tool, though it's not a zooming tool, I've mentioned this in the previous webcast, if you double click on it, you will get the page to the entire spread to fit in the window. So let me zoom in just to show you how that works. I double click on the hand tool, it's thinking, and we're back to the whole spread fitting. So I know some people like this, but for me, keyboard equivalents for zooming are far more productive. Of course, it's going to be completely up to you, and you'll see how your time goes. So the zoom tool, or the magnifying glass, can be used in several different ways. If you place it over a place on the page and you start clicking, let's click maybe in this little flat canyon here. 1, 2. Of course, it's going to make a jump each time. But can you see how much time this is taking? I don't really have time to just keep clicking, clicking, clicking. Now, if you hold down either your Alt or your Option key while you have the magnifying glass selected, that little plus sign is going to turn into a minus. I click, click, click. I keep on clicking, and this gets really boring very quickly. So my suggestion is, and I think I can say with some assurity that most people do not even select this tool. And the reason for that is because the keyboard equivalents, again, are going to be so much faster and make you so much more productive. Another use of this tool, and I'll show you the shortcut in a moment, is that instead of clicking, you draw what we call a marquee. It's just essentially a rectangle around the area that you want to look at in more detail. So I'm going to go down here to this clump of grass on top of this little knoll, and I'm going to draw a rectangle, a marquee, around that area. The size of the marquee becomes the size of my viewing window. So the smaller the marquee, the larger the zoom setting. The larger the marquee, the less you're going to zoom in. And I can see that I am really zoomed in pretty far here. I'm at 784%. I'm going to go back out. Control-0 takes me all the way back out to fit page and window. And I'm going to choose another little spot that I want to check. Let's just say I want to take a look at the scrollings on these rocks. And I made that marquee a little bit bigger, and so I didn't zoom in quite as much. I'm only at 353.5%. So that is a very efficient way to zoom in, but I need to figure out a way to do this without clicking on this magnifying tool. So I'm going to go back to my selection tool, and I'm going to talk about some of these keyboard equivalents. First, if you press Control+, every time you press Control+, as we saw in the View menu, I'm going to zoom in one jump along that predefined zoom setting drop-down menu. And I think with my students, they're actually the ones who got me using this more than I ever did before, because when you're new to an application, you're trying to remember the keyboard equivalents for zooming in and zooming out in a specific way. These are really easy. Control+ or Command+ on the Mac. It's going to let you just jump in and zoom in a little bit more. Control or Command-, this is your hyphen and your equal sign, right? Your minus and your plus is going to take you out those jumps. One of the disadvantages of this, though it has lots of advantages, is that I don't have a lot of control where it's going to zoom in. If something is selected on the page, it will try to zoom in on that, but for the most part it's just going to start zooming in. So how do I get really specific? Think of if you're a right-hand mouser, think of your left hand being the symbol for the longhorns, right? I have my pinky extended and my index finger extended, but my ring finger and my middle finger are tucked in, right? Longhorns. I'm going to place my baby finger, my pinky, if I'm on a Windows machine, on the Control key, and if I'm on a Mac, I'm going to place that on the Command key. Now the Command key is a little bit closer to the space bar, so you may, if you're on a Mac, you may want to do more little peace sign, middle finger, index finger. But I need one finger down on the Control or the Command key, and I need my pointer finger on the space bar. And when I do that, notice that immediately my cursor turns from whatever tool it was in, it doesn't matter except for the type tool, it turns into the magnifying glass. And look over here. I don't have that magnifying glass selected. So now I can just look at this and say, okay, what is this gash here? Oh, okay, that's some green growing in. I let go of those two keys. My cursor goes back to my selection tool, and I can click and select an object, move an object. And now I need to get all the way back out again. I don't want to spend the time to go Control or Command minus, 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 and edge my way back out. I just want to press Control 0 or Command 0 and get all the way back out and look and see what that change, what impact that change had. So let's go through that again. I'm going to hold down either the Control key or the Command key, and that has to be held down just a hair longer or a hair before the space bar. And that'll keep you out of trouble when you're typing, because remember, if you're typing and you press the space bar down, what do we get? We get spaces. So again, I'm going to draw a marquee around something else. Let's say I want to look at the text in these first few lines. I can now switch to my Type tool, make a change, the big castle gate instead of the castle gate, Control 0, and I'm back out. Now I'm in my Type tool. So this is where I've got to be careful when I'm using the shortcut to zoom in. I'm going to hold that Control key down just a hair before the space bar, and there I get my marquee. Again, I can zoom in. Let's zoom in on one of these little pattern pieces. And I'm going to press Control or Command 0 to zoom all the way back out. I would say that 80% of the time when I'm zooming in on a job, this is the keyboard equivalent I'm using. If I'm typing or I'm editing some text and I just needed to zoom in a jump or two, then I will use the Control plus or the Control minus. But what I'd really like you to do this week is spend some time just using these different methods to zoom in and zoom out. Okay, let's move on to the next item. We talked about the fact that if you double-clicked on the hand tool, it fit the spread in the window. But if you double-click on the zoom tool, oh, that's not really doing what I was hoping it was going to do. It's also including my pasteboard area. Try that again. That's more Control 0. I think this page is reflowing really slow, so I'm hoping you guys are actually seeing some of this. All right. I want to talk just a moment before I finish this webcast about something that's pretty new in InDesign, and it's called Power Zoom. And it's a little bit strange, but it allows you to zoom in and out repeatedly, going back and forth between zoom settings that you were at. So for example, let's say that I zoom in. I'm going to use my Control spacebar or Command spacebar method to this little area here. Now in this case, I am going to select my hand tool because your hand tool is what is going to initiate the power zoom. I'm not sure why they chose that tool, probably because you can push it down on your page and it's not going to create something. So I'm in my hand tool. I go somewhere on the page and I hold my mouse button down. It's got to be held down for a couple seconds. Now InDesign zooms out without my doing anything. Notice that now I have a triangle, two little triangles on the back of that hand, one pointing up and one pointing down. As I move my cursor, there's a red box around that cursor, and I now can move it to another part of my page. My mouse button is down this entire time. I let go of my mouse, and it goes back to the zoom percentage that I was at before. Let's try that again. I'm still on the hand tool. I hold my mouse button down. I go back out, move that red rectangle. Let's go maybe over to this corner where I can see all four of the images coming together just to see if they're aligned right. Now what if I want to go back to a different zoom setting? What if I don't want to stay at 533%.4, which is what I'm at right now? I hold down my mouse button, I zoom out, and I can see the red rectangle, but I can use my up and down arrow keys to change the zoom setting that I'm going to return to. Let's say that I want to zoom in more than what I am at right now. I want to see more detail. So I made this rectangle smaller by using my down arrow key. And I go over it, and I'm going to hover over the top of one of these little pattern pieces. Let go. And now I'm zoomed in to 960%. Let's hold that mouse button again. Hold it, 1 and a 2. Takes a couple seconds depending on how fast your machine is. And this time I'm going to increase the size of that rectangle. And I'm going to move it over where I can see both of these images in the top left side. I let go. And I can see that I have not zoomed in near as much as I was before because that rectangle is acting like a marquee. As I discussed about drawing a marquee, the smaller the marquee, the greater the zoom setting. The larger the marquee, the smaller the zoom setting. Now how do I get out of this? See, I just want to move my page around, but every time I hold it down for a couple seconds, it turns into this super zoom, right? If I want to get out of this power zoom mode, press your escape key. And now it won't go into that zooming in and zooming out. You can just use it as a normal hand tool. All right. I think I'm going to log off on this one now. I'd like to keep this as just strictly a zooming podcast, webcast, whatever you want to call it. And I'll be doing another short one on some of the miscellaneous basics that we still haven't covered. I want to talk a little bit about fonts, and I want to talk about typing in panels. And I also want to talk in a little bit more detail about the glyphs panel in OpenType. So let's log off for now. This is, like I said, this is a real short webcast, but this is definitely just all zooming. Please take the time this week to use several of these methods to zoom in and out. In fact, you can even do this on another part of your monitor, or if any of you have a second monitor, you can pause the recording. I do this all the time when I'm listening to lynda.com. I pause the recording, I go and I practice what they said just to be sure that it's functioning the way the speaker has said that it was going to work. And then I go back and I continue listening. It's a great way to get some practice. I heard a very disappointing statistic yesterday. I was talking to another instructor who's been teaching online, and he said that the statistics show that sometimes the online retention is not as much as when you're in a classroom. And that's really because of the time we take practicing items, going through and rehearsing something. I'm a big proponent of muscle memory. In fact, a lot of people will ask me a question and I'll say, oh, let me think. And I have to put my hand on the mouse or my hand on the keyboard, and my hands know better than my head knows. And it takes that continued motion over and over. So if you find something that you think is going to be a great feature for you to use, do it 3 times in a row. Go do something else and then go back and do it 3 more times in a row. But you need that repetition in order for this to just be something that you don't even think about. You're trying to create a document, not become an InDesign whiz. But it'd be awesome if while you were working on documents you were also an InDesign whiz. But it needs to be happening subconsciously. You need to be focusing on your design, on your layout, whatever it is that you're supposed to be doing in InDesign. So let's keep practicing these little foundation pieces so that it becomes much easier for you to be a more successful InDesign user. All right, until next time, bye.